We'll dissect more of the ad hoc committee. Prof, in terms of your analysis with regards to what we're getting, particularly out of the Madlanga Commission, are we seeing that this infiltration is showing more and more of its head with regards to the testimonies that we are hearing?
Well, I think it's a bit premature to come to a conclusion already, but from an initial point of view, I think there's lots of evidence that suggests that. And today's evidence, I think indirectly, it wasn't said directly, but indirectly maybe suggests the same with respect to the arrest of TK Molefe. And I think the evidence, but the focus very much has been on the role of the Hawks. Now, the Hawks is right from its inception, it was in a sense a controversial formation within the police because they substituted the Scorpions, and the Scorpions were seen as actually too independent and too strong as a policing and investigative unit. So, in that sense, I think what we are seeing about the Hawks is very informative about what role do they play as a special unit within the police that is not necessarily always fully integrated into the operations of the police. And I think what we are seeing here is also the interplay, or some would say the competition or the sense of uncertainty of where the different components of the police fit in. Because it is the PKTT, as well as the police in general, as well as, for example, the detective services, as well as the Hawks. And what came out here is the sense of that the Hawks came there in order to so-called verify the validity of the police actions for the arrest of TK Molefe. Now, that's from a person outside the police services, it is very strange to hear something like this, to say that the police is checking on the police about whether they are indeed have the authority to do such an arrest. But I think what we are seeing here is that they are certainly competition, or at the same time maybe different interests that they are representing in this situation. So for the Hawks specifically, I think it's a very, very critical moment in order to justify their role that they play. What was also interesting in this evidence is that they conceded that many ordinary persons who are not employed by the Hawks are pretending to be members of the Hawks and then commit crimes as a result of that. So they have a public trust problem. That the public in general not always trust the Hawks because they might actually be criminals or other persons.
And what, Prof, do you think would have led to some of these loopholes now existing to an extent where the public is not only just not afraid of or respectful towards agencies of such authority, but would go to the extent of impersonating them?
Well, I think what we are seeing is that it happens across a wide spectrum of, especially police services. Not long ago, there was evidence about the abuse of blue lights, for example, in Ekurhuleni, where, and this is now in the case of Matlala, how his companies and these security companies, in a sense, impersonated the police, but with the knowledge of the police in the case of So I think these are all examples. We read on here in the media and the news all the time of incidents where persons have been the victims of crime because they were stopped by persons who pretended to be police or metro police or other components of the police. So these all contribute to the fact that the police are not, or that the police have a public trust problem. For example, one of the witnesses at, I think it was the Madlanga Commission from Ekurhuleni, a very senior person, he said that if he's pursued by a person with blue lights, he won't stop. Yes. He will go to the closest police station before he will stop. So, if an insider is saying that how much is it not applicable to the public in general?
No, very worrying in every aspect. Prof. Mabunda, I mean, you've already touched now on the ad hoc committee, and we saw today the evidence in chief rather of General Dimpani, who is the CFO of SAPS. She gave quite a lengthy account of the finances of the South African Police Service, and she honed in on the PKTT as she was expected to. And she was saying there that over the last few years, the expenditure of the PKTT was within the norms of police spending patterns. What did you make of her as a witness?
Yeah, thank you. That part was very interesting for me because she contradicts what the minister said earlier on during his testimony to indicate to the citizens of this country that one of the aspects that he considered leading to the disbandment of the PKTT was the ballooning budget. But the general today contradicted that assertion. So it is interesting how the committee will weigh this evidence from the minister that he considered the budget as one of the key aspects to disband the PKTT. So, but also, she also indicated that one of the general, I think he testified last week, he appeared to have not followed some processes, internal processes. But since we know that this ad hoc committee and the Madlanga Commission can only just make recommendations, and also they will weigh the evidence that has been presented in these two structures and sift through them. Some of them will not be regarded as reliable evidence, therefore it will be discarded. But today's testimony by the general put to rest that the consideration by the minister was the ballooning of the budget for the PKTT. So she indicated that there was nothing unusual
about that budget. Prof. Kotzé, I mean, just staying on that issue of the budget, it was also quite interesting that she said over the last year she had meetings and presentations with the minister, about 5 of them, and at no point was she ever asked to present on the PKTT, on its value, on whether or not they were getting return on investment, even though she did say it is quite difficult for you to be able to find a value out of an operation such as that. So it really does sort of paint the picture when it goes to that non-consultation of the minister, particularly now when it comes to the issues of the budget.
Yeah,
yes,
definitely. If it was serious, sorry, Prof, you can come in.
Yes, Prof. Kotzé, you may come in, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's indeed so. From what I've seen or watched now, that is the case. And I think what was also very informative is that she said when the minister never asked her from a financial point of view about or discussed with her the possible disbandment of the task team, the PKT task team. So in that sense, she was very careful, I would say, not to raise some serious or critical questions about the sustainability or the financial grounding of the task team. At the same time, I would also say, when one listened to her evidence, she was exceptionally cautious, not to sort of reveal the internal processes of the police service with respect to financial matters. And what was striking for me is that she never presented herself as someone who asked questions. She, to a large extent, accepted what the budgets were, that she didn't have to be critically in interrogating these budgets and the spending on these budgets, except for one, and that is about overtime that has been used, and she complained that became too much. But I think from a perspective as being such a senior person in the police service, one should have expected quite a critical stance from her. You know, normally in big organizations, the finance department is one of those that are almost a watchdog about the budgets of such an organization. And in this case, it looked as if she was more accepting and compliant with the request that came her way, from whether it is, especially from the National Commissioner, General Masimola. If once he made a request, she didn't ask questions.
And Prof Mabunda, I see you nodding there, and I think she.
Yeah, I think.
Yes, you may add that to that.
I think, Prof, it's correct. You know, this culture of comply and complain later is problematic. You can imagine low-ranking officers who have to receive instructions on a daily basis. But here you look at developments at the highest level, at the strategic level of the police, where, as Prof. Kotzé is indicating, that that was an opportunity to ask questions when you have a responsibility to head a department. If somebody is making an unpopular request from your department, you have to engage that person. So it's a concern for us as analysts to say it means people at the lowest level of the police can continue to obey unlawful instructions because they have learned that even generals have no guards to ask if an unlawful instruction is given to them. So I hope that this will be looked at in terms of policy as to when and how you can question certain instructions without having to face consequences for doing so.
And Prof. Kotzé, I mean, she always seemed to be on the fence when questioned about whether or not she felt that the minister made the right decision in disbanding the PKTT from a finance perspective, from a perspective of her understanding what the value was, understanding what the expenditure and the implications thereof was. And she would always throw it back to operations, while if operations felt that it would be disbanded or not, that's what she would always put it on, and not necessarily want to give her own opinion with regards to the standing of the PKTT in relation to her specific designation.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think the question of the budget became a key issue in the presentation of why the minister called for the disbandment of the task team. So the notion about the budget and to what extent it became bloated and to what extent it was something that fit into the overarching budget of the police service and whether there's a duplication with other services, we haven't heard really very much information about that. So whether the decision by the minister to disband the task team was primarily a financial decision, or whether it was a decision about political considerations, or whether it was a decision because of external influences, that some people are arguing that it is because of the role of the big five, as they are called. That is, I think the ad hoc committee didn't receive much guidance from her or information from her in order to come to a conclusion on this. And I think this is quite an important point, because I would, if one goes back to the evidence of the Minister Mkhunu, he made quite a lot about the financial considerations of it, and the fact that there was, in a sense, not an independent or an autonomous budget for the task team, but it depended on the national budget, and therefore was, in a sense, piggybacking on that. I think that is also something which she should have explained more from a financial point of view.
Well, let's hold it right there, gentlemen, as we'll continue our conversation with regards to what took place at the ad hoc committee this afternoon. We are joined by two professors who are giving us this analysis this evening. Do stay with us. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. This is the late edition, and we are talking all things ad hoc committee. We saw today the CFO of SAPS giving her testimony in front of the members of parliament. We are now joined by Unisa politics professor Dirk Kotzé and criminologist at Unisa, Professor Dumisani Mabunda, giving us analysis on that testimony. So, Prof. Mabunda, earlier on, Prof. Kotzé spoke about how the PKTT did not have its own individual budget, how it's been piggy-banking of other resources that the CFO spoke about, how she had to borrow from Peter to pay Paul in order for the PKT to continue. And with this, she spoke about how she was misinterpreted when she asked for the PKTT to be temporarily dissolved in order for it to become a permanent structure, so that from a planning perspective and a financial perspective, she is able then to budget properly for the PKTT. What did you think of her thought process in that sense?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that it appears that she was not listened to. Obviously, we all know that if this process of this establishing the PKTT was conducted in a phased approach, we wouldn't be sitting here today. But we have already heard how it was supposed to be disbanded immediately, instead of trying to enhance that unit to be able to deal with crime in other parts of the country. But this opportunity for this commission and ad hoc committee will assist in terms of strategically planning going forward, so that something like this doesn't repeat itself. So it's a learning curve. We've had witnesses from various angles. Now it will be up to these committees to make recommendations, which we hopefully, we are hoping that they will be implemented, unlike the other recommendations in previous commissions. So we are looking forward to the witnesses that are lined out to present in these platforms.
Prof. Kotzé, I mean, we are speaking about witnesses that are going to be lined up, and just the impact of some of these committees and commissions. We saw that the EFF leader, Julius Malema, had written to the Speaker of Parliament, urging her to provide more resources and support in order to strengthen the capacity of the ad hoc committee. How does under-resourcing of such specialized units, such as the ad hoc committee, affect their capacity to prevent and respond to complex crimes, as well as systemic corruption in the work that they're trying to do currently?
Well, I think one has to look at the budget of Parliament in general, because this is a substructure of Parliament. This is an ad hoc committee, so it's not part of the normal structure of Parliament, like the portfolio committees and the select committees and others. So they had to find an additional budget for this. It is, in terms of the total picture, it's there for a relatively short period of time, but it's very intense. And intense of the work that's been done. They have, I think where this is really referring to is the role of the evidence leaders, Advocate Arendse, and then his two assistants, which he was saying that they simply cannot cope with the workload as it is at the moment. Compare it, for example, with the Madlanga Commission, which I think is 5 or 6 members are in the evidence leaders team. So they are much more capacitated than the parliamentary one. And at the same time, the Madlanga Commission's terms of reference is much wider, and it should continue for much longer. But in the case of, I think, of Parliament, they have a similar pressure on them in order to deliver ultimately similar results. But with certainly a much smaller budget and with less capacity in terms of the evidence leader. So I think certainly it does have a point. I think it also applies to the members of the committee, because if they are bombarded by documents and evidence that they must go through in order to prepare for their questions that they pose to the witnesses. And that is, even there, they are supposed to have more support. Parties do have their own staff, research staff and so on, but it's always undercapacitated. So I think, again, this is something which applies to the ad hoc committee in the first instance, but actually to Parliament in general.
Prof. Mabunda, Julius Malema refers to poorly drafted witness statements, missing, incomplete and inaccurate information, discrepancies, that a poorly capacitated support team like Prof. Kotzé has just mentioned. What do you think would then be the impact of the end result that the ad hoc committee is trying to put together when the evidence that is being put together, the quality of the witness statements is not up to par, and here we are as a nation really looking to resolve many of these very important issues?
Yeah, it's a good question. This simply means that the report that will be produced will be incomprehensive. We need a comprehensive report after all the witnesses have given their testimonies. Let me give you an example. We hear already that tomorrow there might be a possibility to one of the witnesses that Parliament has spent so much to come to his space that he may not necessarily testify tomorrow. So these delays may result in a report that will not be as comprehensive as one would like in an ideal situation where every witness was given an equal opportunity to present their side of the story. But we are hopeful that since the legal representatives have presented their case, in case that the witness tomorrow will not be testifying, they will be given extensions so that by the end of it all, every aspect of this commission has been addressed, and the money that has been provided is well spent.
Surely. Prof. Kotzé, Prof. Mabunda has just touched on it now. The witness that is expected to take the stand tomorrow, his legal team has requested for a start time of 11 a.m., and that is Vusumuzi Kat Matlala. What do you make of the move of the ad hoc committee going to Kgosi Correctional Services in order to have him sit before him? There's been a lot of reaction, particularly on social media, with some people saying where you have Parliament presenting themselves to an alleged criminal. What perception do you think this creates, or should we be looking at the bigger picture with regards to the information that we possibly could get from Matlala?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. And it is because he is a high-risk person or high-risk person in detention at the moment. He's not yet being sentenced. So, but the fact that the hearing is taking place in the Kgosi prison means that they don't want to take any risks with him. So it's very difficult, therefore, to bring him, for example, to Parliament. That would be too high risk in order to do that. So I thought maybe an alternative could have been to take him to one of the prisons in Cape Town, because imagine the cost of the whole committee being flown to Pretoria or Johannesburg, to OR Tambo, and then stay here until Friday, and then go back, and maybe this doesn't materialize because he's asking now for an extension, and it's highly unlikely with that type of request that he will be able to testify before Friday. So that is, but at the same time, they've used now the opportunity, like with General Tempani, to listen to other witnesses at the same time. And so it's not only for Kat Matlala that they are here. But I think he is such a key person in terms of all the evidence that have been presented, both to the ad hoc committee as well as to the Madlanga Commission, that if they can get the opportunity for him to present himself, it might be very useful. I hope it's not a repetition of the Brown Mogotsi sort of theater that almost that we've seen a bit earlier on.
Yeah, and that certainly was my next question to Prof. Mabunda, that should we be expecting another Brown Mogotsi showdown?
Yeah, I think, you know, the Madlanga committee used the power of persuasion. We saw at some stage Brown was almost asking to be excused, and they had to persuade him because they understand that his testimony, whether factual or not, is going to help them at the end. So this issue that we are facing for the witness tomorrow, most likely not to testify, is one of the first challenges that the ad hoc committee has to face. So we need a balancing act. There has to be engagement between the chairperson and the legal team representing this individual in Hosimampuru prison. We have seen that all the witnesses that have testified so far have done so willingly. So if you have to come to a situation where you have to force a witness to say something, it may result in a negative outcome at a later stage.